Hello and welcome back to another inspiring episode of the Matrix Green Pill podcast. I'm your host, Hilmarie, and today's guest is a true fintech trailblazer in the region. Joining us is Ayham Gorani, co-founder and CEO of Pemo, the UAE-born all-in-one spend management platform that's transforming how businesses handle expenses. Under his leadership, Pemo has landed a spot on Forbes Middle East's Top 50 Fintechs 2025, secured over $19 million in funding, expanded into Saudi Arabia, and was recently recognized as one of the UAE's Fortune 100. Ayham's story is one of bold decisions, startup resilience, and the power of purpose-driven leadership in a fast-evolving digital economy. Ayham, welcome and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me on the podcast. Very excited to have this conversation.
Me too. I'm so looking forward to it. Can you please introduce yourself to our audience and tell us how you ended up here in the UAE?
I was born and raised actually in Germany. Perhaps you can hear that out from my accent. I studied computer science in Germany and got exposed to entrepreneurship while studying. And since then, I've been an entrepreneur and building digital solutions for around 17 years. Around 2010, I was in Germany, living there for 27 years, studied there, founded my first company there and sold it. And then I was under the impression that I wanted to see something new. And I had two routes to go, either go to the West or come to the Middle East. Back then, I felt that the Middle East has great potential and I was very excited to come to the region. That's my story. I've been here since 2011. I've seen the progress in the UAE and in the region in general, and very excited that I took that decision to come to this region.
Okay, so I'm going to just ask you about that because you said you had a choice to make, either go to the West or come to the Middle East. What was it about Dubai, the UAE, that attracted you?
I visited the UAE 2010 and I had the opportunity to meet a few people, a few friends trying to understand the ecosystem. I got introduced to a governmental, I wouldn't say incubator, free zone that asked me to join and open my company there because they needed more technical oriented people. That was for me a no-brainer. I would get the support and my skill set was required here. So yeah, the rest is history.
So it's about meeting the right people at the right time.
Yes, and indeed I met the right people, but it turned out that things are not according to plan in many ways. But sometimes you just have to take the leap of faith and go for it, and the rest will come together.
Yes, you can't always plan out everything exactly how it's going to be, but somehow it's one thing leads to another down a path that gets to where you're going. You sort of mentioned that when you were studying early on, that you were exposed to entrepreneurship early on. You founded your first company in Germany. What were some early experiences or influences that shaped your career?
While everyone at university was aiming for a traditional career in the big industrial companies in Germany or consultants or tech companies such as Google or Microsoft, where most of my colleagues from university ended up with, I took another path and it was more by chance than anything else. At that time, entrepreneurship was something that I would read about, but was never exposed to. And one day during the second year at the university, I went to the gym and I met a very interesting guy who exited a tech company in Germany. At that time, he was running a VC. For me, VC and venture capital was something I didn't know. And he asked me if I want to work for him as a student. Indeed, I started working with him. Basically, he opened for me a totally new world of entrepreneurship. And at that time, there was the Web 2.0 phase happening where user-generated content was really, really happening. It was before the emergence of Facebook, Instagram, and all these players, but there was the idea that the internet will change from being a consumption portal only, where users really can participate in that amazing world. So it was a chance that I took. Really wasn't planned as well. And it turned out that this gentleman, which I salute, showed me a world that is outside the traditional path of a career.
I love that you were so open to learning, that when you were offered this opportunity to be a student, that you took it. You could see the possibilities. And as you say, certainly not part of your plan seems to be the thread here is that you were open to opportunities and took them. And then again, this created a whole new path forward for you. Absolutely amazing. Well, let's then jump forward to 2022 and talk about Pemo. You are a co-founder of Pemo. What was the spark behind the idea and what problem were you trying to solve?
On a bigger scale, the problem that I tried to solve is really enabling entrepreneurs, founders, business leaders to focus on what really matters in a business. Having started before 2 companies and helped several startups in building their companies, I felt that founders spend 50 to 60% of their time dealing with things that they shouldn't really deal with. Instead of focusing on growing the business, they are pulled back into firefighting and really managing day-to-day operations, which I believe if I can be part of helping these entrepreneurs and business leaders to focus on really matters, it will have a big impact on the general economy and the region by itself. So that was the core thesis. I wanted to help founders and business leaders to really focus on what matters. When I try to optimize my business and set processes, I found that in the region, I was enabled with a lot of tools, with a lot of SaaS tools to digitize many of these processes. When it comes to collaboration, project management, communication, the tools were there. But when I looked into the finance department, I felt there was a big gap between what should be there and what we had in the region. And this is the gap which I identified and was really passionate about solving.
That's always the key to success, right? Well, at least one of them is find a gap, find a problem, and then create a solution for that problem. And with your own experience in running 2 different businesses, you could see where that gap was. As you said, there were programs and solutions for other areas of running a business, but in the finance department, you could see there was a lack. And then you decided this is a place where I can create a solution for businesses. What makes this space so critical for businesses?
The idea is not a new one. It didn't start 2022. The idea came around 2017, 2018. And when I was researching solutions internationally, I saw a solution in the US. I saw there was a gap in Europe as well, but there were already 1 or 2 players attempting to solve that problem. And when I looked into the Middle East, the fintech infrastructure to build these kind of solutions was not ready. From a regulation perspective, from an infrastructure perspective, they were not there. Actually, I had to wait several years until I felt that now is the right time to start the journey of Pemo, and that was 2022. When we started, still at that moment, there was no card issuer in the market. We had the strong thesis that this is going to happen anytime soon in 2022. And indeed, our timing was right. In September 2022, we issued the first card for Pemo on a fintech partner that was enabling fintechs such as ours to work in that space. So I think for fintech, or not only think, but is generally the case, is that fintech without a proper regulatory framework or infrastructure players is not going to take off. And this is basically the biggest challenge that we face today, that a lot of features that we would love to have in our platform are still not enabled on an infrastructure level. This is one challenge. The second challenge is that although the region, especially the GCC, has a similar ecosystem and similar economics when it comes to companies, the regulators are very fragmented. Every country has a different central bank with different regulations. And to expand in the region, we have to deal with every country by itself. It's different than in Europe. In Europe, for example, it's total opposite. You can have one license from any country in Europe and you can operate in the whole European Union. The challenge that we see in Europe is that countries are different. The tax system is different. Language is different. Culture is different. So if you compare, for example, a country like Italy or Spain with Denmark or Sweden, it's totally different. So here we have a homogeneous, I would say, working environment, but fragmented regulators and total opposite to Europe.
Very interesting. And you, again, with your experience having had companies in Germany and then also in the Middle East, you can clearly see those differences. And I think unless you've worked in both, you would not be so obvious where these differences lie. And as you say, certainly challenges that hold you back from implementing all the features that you would like to have. For our listeners who don't know, can you tell us the story behind the name Pemo?
Now you're putting me in a very sensitive area. I would love to have a story that I could tell that is interesting and engaging and why we came up with the name. However, we are at times where we're limited with domain names. So anything that is easy to pronounce and write and short is something that I would go for. So unfortunately, I cannot tell you a great story behind the name.
Well, it's a practical story for sure.
Thank you.
At least people will remember it because it is short and memorable. Now, you started two businesses before. Were they also always with co-founders, or were you a sole entrepreneur and now you're working with co-founders?
I always had co-founders.
What is the benefit of starting a business with co-founders versus somebody who's a solo entrepreneur?
Having co-founders, the best out of it is that you can divide and conquer, where you know that someone else pulling in the same direction, you can rely on them doing that kind of work. And the second one is the mental support. As you know, startups don't have a linear trajectory. There are ups and downs. On the downs, you want to have someone where you can really talk to and figure it out and really have that support system on that level. As a solo founder, obviously, there is quicker decision making and there is a more cohesive culture that you can build from day one.
You have grown from your three co-founders to a regional fintech success story. What were some of the key decisions that you made early on with Pemo that has helped you to scale?
We have built Pemo from day one with a lot of processes that we have learned previously. Even though it took time for us to build this infrastructure and the processes in the company, they help us to scale from 0 to 1 million to 10 million and above by having strong foundations from a technology perspective, organizational perspective. And we didn't take shortcuts on that perspective, which is not really startup-like. However, we had the time to do that, and we felt that's the right approach to do. So we have built Pemo on a mindset that this is here to scale, and many items or many problems that we face, we solve them the right way. Obviously, there are problems which we solve in a quick and dirty way. However, in general, we have established a strong foundation when it comes to building Pemo. That is one of the decisions that we took early on.
That's interesting because there would be the temptation to always take shortcuts without thinking about the long-term implications. And as you said, you took your time. And even in starting the business, you took your time, as you said, from 2017, 2018 until 2022. So your whole approach to this has been take it slow, look at the market, look at what the issues are, what are the challenges, and then create solid solutions and something that's going to be a long-term solution. And as you've also mentioned that you've got things built in, the infrastructure can't support yet, but I like your long-term, thorough approach to how you solve for problems.
I would probably add to that, I don't believe there is a right or wrong. And I believe as an entrepreneur, we have to be able to do both. At some parts, we have to be very quick and get things done. At other parts, it's more about building the long-term vision. So navigating that is probably something that some people struggle with.
Let's change directions a little bit and talk about funding. You've secured over $19 million in funding. What advice would you give to founders preparing for investment rounds?
So here are a few learnings that I had personally, that in order to raise funds, it has to be a very structured approach with clear deadlines, with the clear preparation and being ready to go to market to close a round very quickly. Usually, if founders don't put this discipline, rounds extend for a long period of time, and usually they don't end with a good outcome. Discipline, preparation, and really putting a clear deadline on the round is important to build the momentum, but also to keep the investors engaged. If there is no deadline, this engagement could be extended and not in the favor of the founder. So the process is quite important, and knowing how to build this momentum and how to build the FOMO. Basically, at the seed stage or pre-seed stage, investors look into three things. They look at the team, they look at the market opportunity, and they look at the solution. We went after VC funds that understood the opportunity, they understood the technology and the product. So we didn't have to convince them on that. We only had to convince them on the team and on the town. Especially for international investors investing into the region, they want to understand how big is the opportunity. So we had some work to do on that front. And obviously, building a team that can fundraise and that complements each other to get the traction that is needed to raise the funds.
Some excellent advice, because as you say, if you understand what it is that they're looking for, and if you are targeting investors that understand the technology, the market, it also makes it a little bit easier to help them to understand the solution.
Yeah, 100%. At the end of the day, the attention span of VCs that receive hundreds and thousands of applications is very limited. So as founders, I hear always the story that VCs are not thorough enough, they don't read enough, they don't look into it, the opportunities too much. And although it might be right, but understanding the other side is very important, that the time they can spend on each opportunity is limited. So it's on the founders to make it easy to understand and accessible for VCs to understand in a few minutes rather than really going deep and extensive. The first step is really getting the attention.
I think that's a very good point to keep in mind, that it's not their job. It's not the VC's job to understand your business. That's your job. That's the founder's job who's looking for the funding. Because as you say, the VCs are being presented with hundreds of ideas. So it's, I think, also the way you present your idea, doing that. I've been in some rounds of where I've watched companies present to VCs, and some are easy to follow and some are very difficult to follow. And if you're not presenting your idea in a very clear way, it's not going to appeal to the right people. So I think what you also said in the beginning about that preparation, keeping the deadlines, and then what you said now, being really good about presenting your ideas could make a big difference.
And sometimes it's timing. When we fundraised the first round, we were just in a bull market where VCs had a lot of money. The change in 23 and 24 where there was less money deployed. So there's also a cycle for fundraising. When is the right time? When not, there are windows which need to be taken into consideration.
Excellent. Some really practical insights for us today. Sort of along the lines of giving some tips to our listeners. I know you've started a couple of businesses now before Pemo. For those who are aspiring entrepreneurs who might be hesitant to start, what practical advice would you share with somebody who has a good idea, but they're holding back?
I'm not a friend of asking people if this is a good idea or not a good idea. Usually this question gives a very biased view of if something is good or bad. What entrepreneurs or people who want to go into that field need to learn is the concept of validation. How can we as entrepreneurs validate ideas quickly and cheaply before building the conviction around the idea? I did the mistake before many times where I have built the conviction around an idea without validating. I went so far as building the product, trying to launch, saw a failure there or iterations, endless iterations to get it to where it should be. The skill set of validating ideas before building anything is very important, not only for the entrepreneurship journey, but for anything in life. I think that is something, if I would have known before, a lot of mistakes would have been eliminated during my career.
I think that's a very important point that I've heard other entrepreneurs say as well, validating the idea. That is through friends, small focus groups that can try out the idea. And as you say, you can find out the issues and probably come up with a better solution by having people validate the idea, if I'm hearing you right.
Correct. And validation, usually you start with tests that are cheap to implement and are accessible to get the first pointers where this is going. But then you can run more complex tests with people that you don't know. And then there are like multiple tests that someone can run before writing a line of code to really give a better understanding of the problem and really what we are solving for. I feel that I did the mistake myself, and looking into the market, a lot of entrepreneurs start with a conviction and it ends up with years of time wasted on ideas that could have been validated within 1 or 2 months. And especially today with AI, it can be accelerated as well.
Yes, AI is certainly making things easier. How do you see AI continuing to impact financial automation and fintech?
AI is changing how we build products and how we operate products. Building that mindset within a company is not an easy one. In general, in the market, if you look at the certain levels, they always operate like companies operated the past 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago. However, AI really changed the game. As entrepreneurs, we need to think of where the future is going and how the future will look like, and then point into that direction and build the company accordingly. In essence, what does AI do for us? AI gives us or enables us to read data at scale, which is the most important, in nearly real time, and process it like large chunks of data. Understanding that, we can see where the future is going. On top of that, it can take decisions. Where I see the future, where I'm excited for, I believe that Pemo shouldn't be a platform. We have today interfaces, we have mobile apps, we have all of these items because the technology is not perfect. In a perfect world, all these processes would be automated in the background without people intervening. I think we are still many years away from that vision, but this is where software is going in the future, where you have less interfaces and more automation in the background. In order to achieve that, you have to think about your data and how you manage your data.
So there's still a lot to be done, a very positive future. As you say, with AI, it's the ability of it to process a lot of data. But I think AI is going to change the way we work, the way we see things. So much is going to be impacted because AI can handle so many things in the back end that will not require human intervention.
Correct.
Now we've come to the segment of our show where I will ask you some rapid fire questions, our version of a game show. Are you ready?
Let's go.
One fintech trend you think people are underestimating?
It's the importance of data and fintechs.
A personal habit that helps you stay focused as a founder?
Having my coffee early in the morning at the beach.
Oh, lovely. The best book you've read recently?
There's the Blue Ocean Strategy, a book that has been on my list since many years, but I've recently only read.
Excellent. One word your team would use to describe you?
I would say friendly.
If you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Learn to validate.
And what is one thing that you do every day, no matter how busy you get?
I wouldn't say every day, but having dinner with my family.
Oh, lovely. I'm sure they appreciate that too. Well, thank you for playing along. That was easy enough. Now I would like to ask you our signature green pill question. What was your green pill moment, the action or event that was the turning point for you or your career?
Coming to the UAE, and not for the location, but being in a new market, more or less alone, not knowing anyone, and building a company basically all by myself. This was a chance for me to learn more about myself, to trust my instincts, to really look into my own faults and try to optimize them, because there was no one else to blame if things failed. And this is something that my first mentor really told me, that most entrepreneurs fail in looking critically at themselves and their actions. And I think I only understood it once I came to the UAE and there was no anyone else to blame for my success or failure. I think that was the biggest learning.
Ayham, thank you for sharing your journey with us today. Your story highlights how purpose, resilience, and clear problem solving can truly drive innovation in our region. Before we wrap up, where can our listeners connect with you or learn more about Pemo?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to have any discussions. And obviously, if you want to learn more about Pemo, you can go to pemo.io and hopefully become our customer as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Matrix Green Pill podcast. If you found today's conversation as inspiring as I have, be sure to follow the show and leave us a 5-star review so that we can continue bringing you more voices that matter. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and never stop building what matters.
If you enjoy our conversations, please like and subscribe. See you next Wednesday.